Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Toilets and Titles. We're back with another off-season breakdown bonus episode. This time, it's a little bit different because we're bringing you a live episode around lunchtime. So hopefully, you guys are enjoying this nice little lunch break, and we're going to be talking some Bears off-season moves with the one and only Lorin Cox. You guys may remember Lorin from last off-season. He came on to talk about the Bears. He's with the Locked On Bears podcast. Lorin, how's it going today, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me and enjoying the downtime a little bit after the NFL draft. But, with schedule release, I guess there's never really downtime.
Yeah, not with you guys over at Locked On. We've had several of you guys on over the last couple of years. Absolutely amazing. We really appreciate you. But tell the people where they can find the Lock On Bears podcast on top of YouTube, because I just found out last week that you guys are all over YouTube as well.
Yeah, pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And we got, of course, the YouTube channels going, social media handles at Locked On Bears, and pretty much all the social medias. And I'm on Twitter at Cox Sport One.
Yeah, very nice play as well. I like that. All right. So here's our intro. Then of course you guys know that I got to pay the bills. So. For those that aren't already aware, Rival Fantasy is the newest evolution in fantasy sports. Rival's all-in-one fantasy platform has changed the fantasy sports landscape. From fantasy bingo, where you mark off boxes of achievements that your players accomplish on the field, to season-long and best ball leagues, to mock drafts and challenges, and more. They have the perfect user-friendly website and app for you. So send a challenge to your friend or send a challenge to your rival and tell them to put their money where their mouth is. But your first deposit of up to $200 will be matched, plus an additional $25 just for using that link, joinrival.com/titletribe. That's joinrival.com/titletribe. All right, Lorin, so this is the first of these episodes this offseason where I feel like I've kind of been busted. I need to update that intro video. We still have Justin Fields on that video in the Bears clip. Time to out with the old, in with the new. I'm going to start right there. Meat and taters right here. We're going to go straight to the NFL draft. The Bears had an incredible NFL draft, especially those first two picks, completely changing the face of the offense. And I think because of that really good draft, a lot of times, a lot of the fans are kind of forgetting that they also made some pretty big splashes in the free agent market as well. So a lot to be excited about with the Bears. But first, please tell me how Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, and anybody else that's new to this offense, especially in those two positions, are going to help shape the face of this offense moving forward.
Yeah, to your credit with the intro video, we don't have clips of Caleb Williams throwing in a Bears. I guess we have practice. We don't have games to pull from for Bears clips there with Caleb, but certainly – super exciting time in Chicago, and you can feel the optimism swelling about the future of this team, especially coming out of a draft like that with Rome and Caleb. Like, everyone gets excited. I think sometimes it's easy to plug them in right away and say, like, wow, these are going to be big upgrades at those positions. But we also have to remember that they're rookies and that there are going to be mistakes along the way, that they're not going to be perfect, and they're certainly not going to be their best in year one, certainly not week one of year one. So, as good or as much as we see from them this season is only going to be a taste of what you hope they can continue to develop in later on down the line. But certainly I think the Bears were kind of backed into a a difficult timing situation when it comes to the quarterback position with Fields, coming up towards the end of his rookie contract and having the number one overall pick and feeling like this was just a quarterback situation that the Bears couldn't pass on in the NFL draft. And then to be able to pair him with a receiver that you feel like the two of them can develop for a long time together. Like the records are so low in Chicago that this could be their all-time leading passer and their all-time leading receiver. And it's not going to take them that long to get there. I mean, Caleb's going to shatter every record there is. The rookie passing record is like 2,100 and something yards from Mitch Trubisky in 2017. Like Caleb will have that done by November, so he's going to blow all these out of the water, and it's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, a lot to be excited about the future, but I mean, let us not forget, like last season, the Bears, it's not like the Bears were bad last season either. Like they finished 7-10. They're only a game and a half off of being a 500 team. Like, so they actually have something to build off of. Like just because they're changing that quarterback position, which is extremely important, and just because they brought in a lot of great talent doesn't mean that they're starting from scraps to begin with. So I think that hopeful for the future is kind of near future for me personally. But next I want to talk about the coaching staff, because Matt Eberflus, when he first came in, was one of those guys who was kind of polarizing. Like some people were excited, some people were kind of a lot of question marks. But at this point, at this stage in the game, and we don't know how much he had to do with the draft necessarily, but at this stage in the game, with what he's done with the team so far, are we also still optimistic about this coaching staff moving forward?
I think I'm cautiously optimistic about the coaching staff because we're not that far removed from being 0-4 to start last season and feeling like a coaching change was maybe necessary, and that even after this regular season, when you had the opportunity to see what other coaching availability were out there, with all the different great coaches that were this was kind of a historic coaching cycle, there was still something like, could the Bears get an upgrade at the head coach spot? They still changed coordinators, and I certainly feel better about the upgrade they made there, specifically at the offensive coordinator, to Shane Waldron from the Seattle Seahawks. I'm optimistic that he can come in and run an offense that will put Caleb Williams in a position to be successful and not try and force a square peg into a round hole, but really kind of adapt a little bit more to the players. We've seen him have success with different quarterbacks in Seattle that I feel like can translate. And it's not one-to-one, but the fact that he do it with different quarterbacks and maybe quarterbacks that weren't as heralded, like Geno Smith and even Drew Lock had a good game there. Like there's some optimism that the coordinators can be everything the Bears need them to be. And then Matt Eberflus just needs to be the overseeing general. And that seems to be like his strength, right? Is culture and leadership and writing the ship. And he's not so much like the innovative schematic mastermind, right? He's not Mike McDonald from the Ravens, I guess now the Seattle Seahawks, but like, we don't think of like Eberflus having these incredibly complex schemes that are just confusing and tricking opposing offenses, but like leads a football team well. And Ryan Poles in the front office have done a good job of assembling talent. And now that the talent is seemingly a lot more firm across the board in the roster, I think this is the kind of group that Eberflus can guide to, even this season, I think, push for a playoff spot.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at this point, if you continue to have more and more talent coming in, you really just need a manager at that position, the manager to help guide them in the right spots, make the right calls. Maybe don't throw a stupid challenge flag in the wrong spot from time to time. But hey, we can all improve in our jobs, that's for sure. Now, this is not this particular show is not a fantasy football show. Our network traditionally is a fantasy football network. Last season, a player that you guys had on your roster that was extremely frustrating to me, and not by the player's fault, in my opinion, was Roschon Johnson. So Roschon Johnson, in my opinion, was the most talented running back on that squad all season last year, but he never really got the opportunity. I could be wrong. I'm not the coach. I don't see them day in and day out. But now you get DeAndre Swift. So that, obviously super talented running back. Khalil Herbert has proven himself worthy when in there. Do you think Roschon really even gets a chance again this year in that backfield? And then also, how much elevation does the dynamic of DeAndre Swift bring to that offense as well?
Yeah, Roschon is an interesting case there because I agree. Like he's a lot more talented than the Bears utilized him last season. He's probably at least last year, he was their best receiver out of the backfield and their best blocker in the backfield, but they still wanted to get Khalil Herbert and Deontay Foreman pretty well involved there. And I think at this point, like, last season, Herbert was still the better pure runner of the two, but like it always felt to me like, that Roschon Johnson was going to be the Bears starter in 2024 until they signed DeAndre Swift, and that kind of throws a wrench in things. And I wasn't a huge fan of the Swift signing just for that reason. Like, he's a good player by all means, but like between Herbert and Roshan Johnson, I feel like those guys can handle a lead back kind of role, and then you can still add a depth running back to give you something else there or draft somebody. But like, this didn't feel like a team that needed like that missing piece at running back. Like, running back was already a position that they were pretty well stocked in, and I would have rather maybe invested that position or invested that money at another position. Still, like, Swift is a 1,000-yard guy. He's explosive. He's a guy who's going to come in and be a difference maker for them. And you can never have too much talent. I'm not going to complain about adding more talent. I just would like to add more talent, maybe at a different position. But still, I think it's an upgrade there over what they had in the backfield last season. And I think it makes it hard for the other two, Herbert and Roshan, to be consistent fantasy options if Swift's going to be that every down guy. But I think Herbert's got a lot to prove this season on his contract year. Coming up, he'll be a free agent next year. Like, he's got to show teams that he can be more than just a great runner, but be a receiver and a blocker out of the backfield. Because I think the plan is to roll with Swift and Roshan in the long term. And this feels like it'll be Khalil Herbert's last season in Chicago, unless somebody gets injured or something crazy happens.
Yeah, that's fair enough, and I hate to see that as well, but also he'll go somewhere. He'll land somewhere for sure. All right, so you already touched up on the wide receivers a little bit with Roma Dunze, but honestly, this is possibly the best trio at wide receiver in the league. If not, it's right up there. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome. Keenan Allen comes over from the Chargers after a long career there. I don't think we have to talk a heck of a lot about the wide receivers. If you want to, by all means, but I'm more interested in any other free agent moves that the Bears may have made that made some splashes that are going to be a year one contribution to the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's the wide receivers kind of speak for themselves, right? Where it's like it feels criminal to not mention how exciting it is to have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, but like, how much more can you add to that, right? It's like, yeah, those guys are great, and you have people dreaming of 3 1,000-yard receivers in Chicago this season. I don't think that's realistic to expect, but like, it's not out of the question, but I don't think it's for Rome Odunze's rookie season. And Keenan Allen is, what is he, 32, turns 30, or just turned 32. So I don't think he's washed or anything yet, but like, eventually he's going to slow down, but just had the best season of his career. So, I mean, they're absolutely stacked at the top at wide receiver, some younger guys behind them that they're developing, but really it's a three-headed monster there. An underrated free agent, though, that I think is going to have a bigger impact than people expect is Gerald Everett at tight end, coming over from the Los Angeles Rams, but he has played, or certainly with the Chargers last season, but he's played with the Rams and the Seahawks with Bears offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. So like, there's an instant familiarity with the system and with the coach who knows how to use him. And I think being able to have that second versatile tight end can dictate so much of what the defense is going to do, that when you put Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett on the field, both of those guys are legitimate threats as receivers, but also capable enough blockers. I think Cole Kmet's a better blocker than Gerald Everett, but Everett's not, useless as a blocker either. So as a defense, if there's two tight ends on the field, do you have to respond to that with your base package of 3-4 or 4-3? Like, do you have to have 7 guys up in the box then? Because otherwise, then you've got Odunze and Keenan Allen on the outside, or whatever combination of receivers. Like, you end up being able to dictate the coverage a lot better from a two tight end set. And we know the Bears offensive coordinator not only knows Gerald Everett, but also likes to use multiple tight end sets even when he hasn't had Gerald Everett. So I think I don't know that Everett is going to come out and have some kind of crazy 800-yard season or anything, but I think his impact on the offense, like having him out there, will make everyone else's job easier. And even if it's sort of more like dirty work style of, he's not getting the catches, but he is helping everybody else get their catches.
For those of you watching that want kind of a fantasy football edge to this conversation with the two tight ends here, I think whatever it doesn't necessarily hurt Kmet here, because I think that ultimately, just like Lorin said, it's better for the team. It's going to help move the ball for the team. Maybe he loses a few targets here and there, Cole Kmet, but overall, there's going to be more scoring opportunities, or they're going to be on the field for longer. And Kmet was surging last season. He was starting to come on, like potential for another huge breakout season this year, even with Everett there. So I'm not running away. I'm not scared of Kmet at all because of Everett by any means. But the only way that this offense all works together is if Caleb Williams has time in that backfield to make things happen. Right now, Pro Football Talk has the Bears ranked as their 10th ranked offensive line going into the season. And I know they spent a draft pick, fairly high draft pick. I think it was a third round pick on an offensive lineman. Again, not a bad offensive line last season. And I think at times maybe some of the quarterback play made the offensive line look a little bit worse than it really was because, Justin Fields like to move around a bit. Overall, do you like the improvement of the offensive line? Do you think that they're going to be able to keep Caleb Williams upright long enough to make some magic happen his rookie year?
Yeah, I would describe it as cautiously optimistic that the Bears have such a history of offensive line always being a disappointment that it's hard to trust it that it's all gonna go well. Like something's gonna go wrong, but it's not like there's an obvious like, oh yes, you should have known on the front end that this player was gonna be terrible or whatever. Like it's something you can feel generally well about, but like they were hurt a lot last season and had to get a lot of different guys in and out of that rotation. And so you're kind of hoping just like some stability, I think, would go a long way in this group. The weakness is definitely at center, where it's been a weakness for a long time, but they've kind of done a piecemeal approach this offseason. They traded for Ryan Bates from the Buffalo Bills, who the Bears had actually tried to sign in free agency 2 years ago as a restricted free agent. The Bills matched their offer, and now they traded for him to get the guy they really wanted a couple of years ago. And then they brought in the Rams center, Coleman Shelton, and they'll be competing to be the starting center there. And it's kind of like you have two centers, you have none, kind of like if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. If you have two centers, like I would have really liked to have been able to say, all right, Caleb, here is your veteran center who's been in the league a long time, has seen everything, and you guys are going to practice snapping with each other from the moment you're drafted until week 1, and you're going to be lockstep center quarterback connection. And I don't love the idea of competition there, and like maybe if one of them struggles, then you make a change 6 weeks in the season, and it's like you want to get the right guy out there. I get it, but like I really want that stability and continuity up front, and that's the one spot where you just wish you could have been able to address it a little bit better, but you can only do so much in one offseason. But the other 4 spots are the same returning starters at tackle and guard. And if those guys can stay healthy, you feel like the 3 of them are quite young and can kind of keep ascending in their career. And then the veteran they signed last year, he gave us from the Titans, was underwhelming his first season with the Bears, but had some off-field issues with some family stuff early on. He missed a couple games, and then he had a knee or an ankle injury and missed 5 or 6 games. So he was never really like out there enough to settle in. And I'm hoping that year 2, everything can be a little more calm with him and a lot more stable on this offensive line.
Yeah, from top to bottom, if you're going to rebuild a team, the Bears are definitely doing it right. And honestly, I wrote an article about a month ago about just how bad of a trade it was for the Panthers last year with that 101 pick with the Bears, and it set the Bears up really nicely moving forward. But if you go back and check out that article, for those of you watching, if you like, it's toiletstitles.com. It's interesting to see all the pieces and how they ultimately lay out as trades happen years down the road. We're only 1 year removed from that trade, and it was just so bad for the Panthers. All right, so my man George usually likes to ask a lot of or ask some defensive questions. Obviously, we do need to get to the defense, but before I do that, the rest of the draft. Now, when you go Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams with your first 2 picks, it's almost near impossible to tick off your fan base, even if you take a punter in the 4th round. But I'm more interested in that 5th round pick, Austin Booker, because I don't know much about him. Have you done any studying up on him yet? He is a defensive lineman. I know that they needed a little bit of help at that defensive line, so it seemed like by position a little bit of a good fit there. But I don't know much about the guy. So between him, the new rookie coming in on the defensive line, and any other new free agents that have come in on that defense, are we going to be able to shore up that defense a little bit?
Yeah, Austin Booker's interesting because there's not a lot of tape on him. He has 1 career start in his college career, and really this last season at Kansas was his only like full season of playing. Early on, he was committed to Minnesota and was on the bench for them, like occasional snaps here and there, but transferred to Kansas and wasn't even the starter for them, but led them in sacks and forced fumbles and I think tackles for losses this past season as sort of that like designated, not even just designated pass rusher, but like 3rd defensive end who rotated in there and ended up playing a pretty significant share of snaps. Even though he wasn't the starter, he still played a decent amount. It was really productive. I think for him, he's not the biggest and he's not the fastest and he's not the strongest. So I wonder exactly how high the ceiling ends up being, but he's a little bit raw still. I mean, he's a guy who's got good length and can really, he just finds a way to kind of, the word they use is slippery is a great way to describe him. Like he just gets by guys, and it's not always like perfect technique, but sometimes it's just like just enough bend with just the right hand placement, but it's not like crisp. It just kind of worked for him. So I think there's going to be an adjustment there to the NFL level where like stuff he could get away with in college is going to need to be a lot more refined in the NFL. That I think he's got a high enough floor that he's going to contribute right away as a rookie. It's hard for me to envision him becoming like he gets compared to Max Crosby physically and has worked with Max Crosby this offseason, but like he's a 5th round pick, and I try and like let's slow down on making him the next Max Crosby here, because that's I don't think he's quite as explosive as Max Crosby, not quite as strong, but guys can come to the NFL and get an NFL program and maybe get that much bigger. But he certainly got an opportunity on this defensive line because they lost a couple guys in free agency and haven't really done much to replace them at all. Like Booker's kind of their big addition in that group. They signed a couple of, league journeyman backups, Jacob Martin from the Colts and Michael Doomfor from the Patriots, I think we played with last. Like guys that are not household names at all, a couple of backups. So they're rolling with Montez Sweat and DeMarcus Walker at defensive end. And on the interior, there's second round pick from last year, Javon Dexter is supposed to step up into the starting 3 technique role. And I'm not optimistic that group is going to be great. Maybe not the worst defensive line in football, but in the bottom group, unless they address that position now between now and training camp, which they did last year. And I kind of have this feeling like they're going to get to training camp and do the same thing, where one of these veterans that wants to skip OTAs without holding out, they just choose to wait to sign until training camp. And it might even be re-signing Yannick Ngakoue again from last season, because it's just like, all right, familiar face, let's run it back and see if we can do this a little better with Montez Sweat now here for a full season instead of just half.
Yeah, and Yannick Ngakoue is actually a familiar face to half of the league by now. That guy's made his rounds. But I mean, I absolutely love that. The people that watch this show already know that I'm a fan of the Colts. So like, I don't know the teams in and out like this. So it's really awesome to be able to bring you on and get some real insight from somebody that follows the team and knows the team inside out. I do want to ask one final question. This is one that my man George, who usually co-hosts with me, he has to work today. Poor guy. So he usually asks this question at the end. So take out quarterbacks. We're going to pretend like quarterbacks are not in the pool. Any single player on any team in the league that you wish you could just take from their current team and add them to this Bears roster. It can be any player, it can be any position, and then also your reasoning for that. Just not quarterback, which at this point we kind of want to see what Caleb has anyway. So
yeah, I was gonna say obviously there would be 1 or 2 quarterbacks. It'll be a handful of quarterbacks, but that like usually that would be the answer, right? For the Bears, it's always like, oh well,
yeah,
quarterback. But this is one of those years where it's like, oh no, we're good. I would love Aaron Donald just retired, but that might have been my first answer for someone who I mean, I know he's on the other side, but he's still so dominant. It has to be a defensive lineman for sure. Honestly, like I'm really torn between an edge rusher or a defensive lineman, but I feel like somebody like Myles Garrett that I feel like is big enough that I could even kick him inside sometimes and pass rush from inside. Like I think he's the one I would go to and say, yeah, the big physical edge rusher on the opposite side of Montez Sweat, where I can get creative with my guys. Like I do think the defensive tackle position is weaker on the Bears, but I think the impact of adding somebody like that, as opposed to like, Chris Jones from the Chiefs or Dexter Lawrence or something, like I just feel like getting somebody like Myles Garrett can have a little bit more of a ripple effect across that defensive line and put everyone in a better position to be successful. Just would, I mean, you wouldn't stand a chance with Sweat and Myles Garrett on the opposite sides of each other. Like I don't need that great of an interior pass rush at that point, because you're putting all your attention on the edges anyway.
I do like that, and the reason he asked the question obviously is because we want to see what you think is the weakest spot on the team. Clearly, that is a weak spot, and for what it's worth, though, I'm pretty sure I heard something in the grapevine a few weeks ago that maybe Aaron Donald hasn't completely shut the door on a potential comeback, and he is one of those veterans, as you said earlier, that might just not want to go through OTAs, and really he doesn't need to. Like he could show up day of and never practice ever again, and still be a Hall of Fame defensive lineman. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there. Like I I think he's retired and he deserves to move on. But if he comes back, we're all going to be excited for it. But all right, so Locked On Bears, Lorin Cox, and I have the credentials rolling across there at the bottom at Cox Sports One. Man, I greatly appreciate you coming on, and we look forward to listening to you all season. And mid-season, something big happens, or the Bears go off on a 9-0 start, we might have you on back again to talk a little Bears again, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course, man. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Appreciate your time. You have a good one.
You too.